Hi, welcome back to the Fantasy Profits. Thanks for joining us today. This is our Week 10 start sit video, but before we get into the start sit advice that we're going to give you on some games there, we want to take a moment to thank all of you that have been a part of the community, who subscribe, like our videos, comment. We appreciate that. Continue to help us grow the community. You can do that by continuing to watch, like, comment, things like that. Let your friends know, share the videos, etc. And as resources continue to come into us, we're just going to put them back into the site, better equipment, better information to get back in your guys' hands so you can be more competitive. We always tell people, if you've never watched the videos before, contextualize this information. There's so many different leagues out there, scoring systems, rules, etc., settings, and so you need to take this and flex it into your league. If you have specific questions, put it at the bottom. We'll do our best to answer it. We try to give an in-depth breakdown of why we believe it, but it's not always possible to do that. Sometimes we keep it a little bit shorter, but we do try to get to your questions. Also, some people have said, why do you do it on Tuesday night? Information is going to change, and that is certainly true. It doesn't matter when I did the video, though. I can do it Friday afternoon. I can even do it Saturday. Literally right up to the game time kickoff, information can change. So as an owner, you need to always be on your feet. We do a daily fantasy video on Fridays, and in there we will do some added waiver wire and start set information. Another thing I want to mention real quickly before we get in, we are partnering with a daily fantasy company out there called Thrive Fantasy. I'd like to explain to you, but it's very different than anything that you've ever experienced in daily fantasy. Click on the link below and check it out. Once again, I think you really enjoy it. So let's get into the video. So let's look at the Carolina Panthers versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. Start with the quarterbacks there, Ben Roethlisberger. Now he's playing the Panthers. They're allowing the 14th most points to quarterbacks there. Now, if you look at that number, they're allowing a decent amount of points to quarterbacks, but they haven't faced a ton of good quarterbacks to this point. They faced Dak Prescott, Andy Dalton, Eli, Alex Smith, Flacco. When they faced a good one, for example, like a Matt Ryan tore them up. He lit them up. And so I think this is a good matchup this week for Ben Roethlisberger. If you take away his bad week one, since then he's been playing really well. Since then, his interception to touchdown ratio, he's got 15 touchdown passes to only 4 interceptions. Now he's playing Cam Newton. Now Cam is moving the ball. That offense is starting to click there for Carolina. So I think there's going to be incentive for Ben to have to throw the ball later in the game. This is not going to be a blowout. I think there'll be a decent amount of points scored in this one. So Cam Newton in this game here. Cam Newton needs to start Cam Newton just like Ben Roethlisberger there. Now he's playing the Steelers to get the 5th most points to quarterbacks. Now, because of players like Pat Mahomes right now, I think a lot of people are overlooking the fact that Cam Newton's having probably the best season of his career. If you consider his quarterback rating right now is the best he's ever had. He's on pace for 30 touchdown passes, and his customary 600 to 700 yards rushing, on pace for about 8 touchdowns. So having a very good year there. I like Cam Newton. Start him. As far as running backs go, you have James Conner in this one. This guy's been a revelation. What a blessing for a lot of guys. I own him in 3 leagues. I'm praying and hoping, Bell, stay out. Don't report to the Steelers at this point. Now he's playing Carolina, who allowed the 6th fewest points to running backs, so they're tougher versus running backs there. But then the Ravens were really good defense going into last week, and it didn't matter. Connor had a huge game there. He's had 5 games over 100 yards rushing. He's got 10 touchdowns on the year, 38 catches so far, and a yards per carry of 4.7. There's nothing about his game that's not great at this point. He's a good start. The only concern I have about James Conner in this one is it's a quick turnaround on a Thursday night game. Maybe they're going to lower his touches, although Coach Tomlin came out today and said they're not going to do that. He's going to get his normal workload, so hopefully they'll stick to that. As far as Christian McCaffrey goes, this guy's been playing great. Even when they shut down the run, he's so active in the passing game. Probably their best wide receiver. In fact, there's no probably about it. He is their best wide receiver out there, even though he's a running back. He's a guy that you got to start also as a running back 1. As far as wide receivers in this contest go, talk about Juju Smith-Schuster. Started as a wide receiver 2 in larger leagues. I would say wide receiver 3 if you're in a what I call average league. Now Cam Newton once again is going to put points on the board. I think it's going to force Ben Roethlisberger to have to throw, and so I think a guy like Juju is going to get a nice targets. I think 8-9 targets will be about what he's going to see. They look at Antonio Brown there. He's got a touchdown in 6 consecutive games, 9 touchdowns for the year. Now, with players like Connor doing well and Juju Smith-Schuster being successful there, I think his catches and his yards are lower this year, but it doesn't matter. This guy's still a stud wide receiver 1 you need to start. That's a no-brainer start, Antonio Brown. I would sit the other Pittsburgh wide receiver. As far as the wide receivers for Carolina goes, look at Devin Funchess. Had a really nice matchup last week versus Tampa Bay. Didn't have a big game. Why was that? Why didn't he have bigger numbers? Well, they got up 31-7 quickly. And it's like they took their foot off the gas for quite a while there for a stretch of that game. They weren't pushing things downfield quite a bit. Now they play Pittsburgh, who allow the 7th most points to wide receivers. So another good matchup for Devin Funchess and the wide receivers there for Carolina. I think Ben Roethlisberger once again is going to throw the ball. I think they're going to put up a lot of points. I think they're going to need to continue to throw the ball. Unlike Tampa Bay where they got up 31-7, that's not going to happen in this game here. So I think that he's a wide receiver 3. That's a safe start with a lower ceiling. And then you have DJ Moore. So DJ Moore had been trending up, but he disappointed last week. He only had 2 touches after getting better and better. His touches has increased, his yardage had increased. But this guy is still very talented. He's a former first-round pick. He's got skills, and I think I would start him this week as a wide receiver 3. I think he'll rebound and have a decent game there. Now, the problem with it is many owners, they begin to look, they want a wide receiver 3 who's a lock in terms of production. If anybody tells you they've got a lock wide receiver 3 for production, they're probably lying to you or exaggerating. What makes a lock performance-wise? Okay, in order to call a guy lock in performance, he's got to do 2 things. He's got to have a good matchup and be very talented. And wide receiver 3s simply aren't that. So there's always going to be hit or miss. But I look at a guy like DJ Moore, once again, this is a great matchup. Curtis Samuel, some are talking about starting him. I would stay away from him. His targets haven't been there. His touches are simply not there. Yeah, he had 2 touchdowns, but I think that's more an anomaly. Until he does that more consistently, I would stay away from starting him. As far as tight ends go, you got Greg Olsen. Touchdown 3 weeks in a row. He's looking like he's fully healthy finally for now. His yards are going up. He's playing Pittsburgh that allows the 4th most points to tight ends. So he's a great start this weekend. Then you move to the tight ends for Pittsburgh. Got Vance McDonald and Jesse James. So Carolina allows the most points to tight ends. So this should be a great matchup. Here's a concern that I have. Vance McDonald and Jesse James have had 1 good game this year. You take that away, they've been average at best, maybe even a little bit below average. It's really hard to pin down who's going to get the majority of the touches. They tend to steal targets from one another. If I had to put my money on a guy, it'd be Vance McDonald, who I think you can start him because it is a good matchup, but he's not a great play because, once again, there's so many other weapons there, and Jesse James is there, and so, once again, there is concern with that. As far as kickers go, I would start Gano, and I would start Boswell if you need to, but if you can look elsewhere, I'd try to avoid starting Boswell. Gano's a great start there, and I would sit both defenses in this one. So what about the Lions versus the Bears? Well, let's start the quarterbacks again. Matthew Stafford there. He had a bad week 1, and then last week he was destroyed by the Vikings. Really, I don't think it's his fault. I have a friend of mine who's a Lions fan. He just hates Matthew Stafford, but the poor guy got sacked 10 times. He was running for his life there. So I think that poor play last week is really a product of the Minnesota defense playing much, much better at home. Of course, they got Everson Griffin back there. Xavier Rhodes is back. Daniil Hunter's been playing great. So I think a lot of it was just a product of playing on the road against a Vikings defense that is trending upwards at this point. Look at the last 6 games before last game, his touchdown-interception ratio was really good. He had 13 touchdown passes to only 2 interceptions. I expect he's going to rebound this week. He's not going to be nearly as bad as he would versus the Vikings. With that said, I don't think that he's a good start this week, and the reason why he's playing Chicago, and that Bears defense is very good, and Khalil Mack sounds like he'll be back for this game, and so their front 7 is very good there. I also have to wonder how much he's going to miss Golden Tate. He was a security blanket. The guy was great possession receiver out there. He's a guy that I think you could start, Matthew Stafford, in 2 quarterback leagues or large leagues, but I would avoid him in smaller leagues there. Let's get Mitch Trubisky. So he was very quiet against the Bills, but that was a blowout. They destroyed the Bills 41-9. Before that, he had 4 consecutive games. He put up good fantasy numbers. Now he plays Detroit. That gives up the 15th most points to quarterbacks. Now, Cousins was quiet versus the Lions, but a lot of what happened is if you watch the game, once Stephon Diggs was out, they controlled that game quite a bit. They dominated on defense. He wasn't asked to do a lot there. And so I look at Mitch Trubisky, who's not a Tier 1 quarterback at this point by any stretch, but I think he's a guy that can be started. As far as running backs go, Tariq Cohen plays the Lions that allow the 8th most points to running backs. Now, last week, he was another one for the Bears. I was kind of quiet and disappointed, but it was game flow. They blew out the Bills, once again, 41-9. They got 2 defensive touchdowns. And he's a guy, if you look at Cohen, who excels in the passing game. Well, they didn't need to throw the ball a lot in that one, so they turned to Jordan Howard to kind of milk that clock. Now, Detroit's going to put up a better fight than the Bills. I think anybody would do that. And so I think that Tariq Cohen, I think, is a guy that you're going to start as a as a running back 2 or flex play in PPR leagues or running back 3 in standard leagues. Go ahead and start him. And then you bring this to Jordan Howard. So he's been useful last few games. He got 4 touchdowns in the last 3 games. But he's a guy that I call touchdown dependent. Jordan Howard is a guy going in this year that I like. I don't think he's a very good fit for that Nagy offense, where we're beginning to see it. He's not getting active in the passing game. The catches aren't there. His yards per carry are down at 3.5. I would sit him in PPR leagues, but I would start him as a low-end running back 2 in standards. What about Kerryon Johnson? I like Kerryon Johnson. I think he's got a lot of talent. I think that there's a lot that he can do. Once again, Minnesota crushed the Lions last week. That was a defense that is trending up. But I think the Bears... front 7 is probably equally as good as the Vikings, maybe even better, some would argue. And so I think that they're not going to sack Stafford 10 times. But I think they can make things difficult for Kerryon Johnson in this one. The one thing I do like, though, why I think you can play him still, and why you can play him as a running back 2 in PPRs and standards, I would say he's a low-end running back 2, is his catches are increasing. This is a guy that's got good hands, he's good in space, and so once again, he's more involved in the passing game, he's catching the ball in the backfield. Now that Tate is gone, I think that those catches that we're seeing from him are going to continue to be consistent there, and so that's where I would land with him. As far as Marvin Jones in this game, the Bears front seven is good, like I had mentioned. You could probably even argue they're as good, if not better, than the Vikings. But the Vikings secondary is much better than the Bears, and I think Marvin Jones is going to find some space there. He's going to get open. And this is evidenced by the fact that the Bears give up the 12th most points to wide receivers. So I like Marvin Jones in this one, especially with Tate gone. Started him as a wide receiver too. Then there's Kenny Golladay. Feels like forever since this guy has had a good game. You go back, it's actually been 3 games and a bye week since he had a good game there. But if you look at it, the first 5 games, he was on the brink of becoming a wide receiver 1. So this guy's got a lot of talent. Better days are ahead for him. And if you have any concern about where he's at, the one thing that's good is the Golden Tate trade really solidifies his usage, his targets there. So I like him this week as a wide receiver 3. Now it brings us to wide receivers for the Bears, Taylor Gabriel. Lions allow the 4th fewest points to wide receivers. Now Gabriel's been solid but not great. Now this offense, if you look at Nagy's, they like to involve a lot of different people in the passing situations. It's not just the wide receivers that are getting the targets. They like to use their tight ends. They like to use their running backs. Very similar to when he was the offensive coordinator or the quarterback coach for Kansas City. In fact, they had 1 year in 2014 that not one wide receiver caught a touchdown. And so I look at Taylor Gabriel in this one. I think he's a wide receiver 4. He's on that bubble of being a wide receiver 3, depending on your league size, if you need to start him. But I would prefer that you sit him. Then there's Anthony Miller. This rookie is looking better and better. I think he's getting more comfortable in the league there, but he's just not there yet. He's a wide receiver 4 or 5, somebody that you need to sit. And then that brings us to Allen Robinson. So the last week he had limited practice. Got some practice time in there. Didn't play last weekend. Looks like he's projected to start this weekend again. And if he does, I think you need to play him as a wide receiver 3, but he hasn't been great at this point. But I think he's a guy that is brought in as a wide receiver 1, but is not playing as wide receiver 1 there. So I would say he's a wide receiver 3 in deeper leagues. As far as tight ends go, I would sit the Lions tight ends, and I would start Trey Burton. Burton's a solid but not a great play. He does have 4 touchdowns on the year, so I like him there. As far as kickers go, you got Prater and Parkey. They can be played. Neither of them are great starts, but they're not bad. As far as defenses go, start the Bears, but sit the Lions defense. So how about the Bengals and the Saints there? Let's look at Andy Dalton. Well, New Orleans allows the 3rd most points to quarterbacks. Now, Drew Brees is facing the 30th ranked defense in the NFL. Cincinnati allows 29.6 points per game. This is going to be a heyday for Drew Brees in that offense, meaning Andy Dalton's going to have to throw 40 to 50 times just to keep them in the game, most likely there. And so I would start Andy Dalton. Here's the one thing I would say. I really like the matchup for Andy Dalton. Of course, now A.J. Green's going to miss this game. It's like that from being a great lock, I would say he's still a decent play, but not nearly solid with Green in there. But I would go ahead and play him. Drew Brees, start Drew Brees. Playing a defense allows the 4th most points to quarterbacks. Drew Brees is a no-brainer. Start him. Let's look at running backs. Look at Joe Mixon. So New Orleans allows the 7th fewest points to running backs. On paper, looks like a tough matchup, but Mixon's going to be highly involved in a lot of different areas, including the passing game. I won't be surprised to see him get 7 to 8 targets, especially with Green out of there. I think another thing to consider for the Bengals is, they don't want to get into a shootout, so I think they're going to try to run the ball as much as they can, control the clock, try to keep the possessions or time of possession down for the Saints there. I would start Mixon as a high-end running back too. And then there's Bernard might be back. Giovanni Bernard might play in this one. If he does, do you play him? Does he have value? Well, for me, unless Mixon is out or gets injured, he's not a guy that you could start. And then you got Alvin Kamara. So you look at Alvin Kamara out there. A lot of people panicked when Ingram returned. We said, don't worry about it. It's 1 week. The reason why he sat a lot is he had 4 weeks of hard usage. They're getting Ingram some carries there. We said not to worry about it. Sure enough, you see that this guy's a stud. Alvin Kamara is a great running back, by far the better running back than Mark Ingram. So start him as a running back 1. As far as Mark Ingram go, we actually talked about him having a regression this year. And I think we're seeing that right now, evidenced by the fact that his production's down. His yards per carry, 3.6, doesn't look nearly as effective as Alvin Kamara in this one. So I think in most weeks right now, I'm looking at Mark Ingram as kind of a running back 4. But this week, he's playing Cincinnati, allows the 5th most points to running backs. I also think there's a really good shot that the Drew Brees in that offense gets ahead. This becomes kind of a blowout, and they're going to lean a lot more on Mark Ingram in this one. So in this one, I would say start Mark Ingram as a running back 3 there as a flex play, something like that. As far as wide receivers go, you have Michael Thomas. So on paper last week, that should have been a tough matchup for him, but we just saw how talented this guy is. Every week, you need to start this guy as a wide receiver 1. We always try to say start your studs. That's why you don't leave a guy like him on your bench. Hopefully, there's one guy that asked last week. We told you not to sit the guy. We hope you didn't, because if you did, I know you're kind of heartbroken. You got Traquan Smith. Traquan Smith did have a touchdown last week, but his targets and usage just simply aren't there. And so for me personally as an owner, I wouldn't trust him. And I would tell you not to trust him either. I would stay away from that. Now let's look at the wide receivers for Cincinnati. You got Tyler Boyd. New Orleans allows the most points to wide receivers. Now, Boyd was playing really, really good before Green got hurt, and now Boyd's going to become their #1 wide receiver. So I would start him as a high-end wide receiver 2 in fantasy. I really like this matchup for him, and I like him. As far as the other Bengals wide receivers, somebody might emerge this week as a guy that you can look as a viable option. I have my opinions of who I think it's going to be, but nobody knows for certain. It's purely speculation, okay? So I think we need to wait a week and don't risk it, and let's just see how this plays out before we can trust another wide receiver on that team. As far as tight ends go, you got Benjamin Watson playing Cincinnati. He gives up the second most points to tight ends. Now, I think he's a guy that you need to start, but he's not a lock. We saw that a couple weeks ago. He was played Minnesota. Minnesota gives up a lot of points to tight ends, and he got a big 0. So I think these guys got a great matchup, and because of the position, tight ends is very thin. You'll have to play him. Now he has 2 touchdowns last 3 games, so he's got a nice matchup play. That brings us to the tight end for Cincinnati, CJ Uzuma. He's a guy that I would just simply sit. I know he's playing New Orleans, who are tough on tight ends. They allow these 6 previous points to tight ends. He hasn't been very good. He hasn't been very productive, and so sit him. As far as kickers go, I would start Lutz. I would sit Bullock. I would sit the Bengals, and it's preferred if you could. If you can afford it, I would also sit the Saints. If you have to play them, I guess it's an okay play, but not a great play. So what about the Browns and the Falcons? We'll look at Baker Mayfield. Well, he's playing Atlanta, who grew up the second most points to quarterbacks there. Now, he's really progressing nicely as a quarterback. In fact, I think he's leading all quarterbacks. As far as the quarterbacks were drafted in 2018, to me, he looks head and shoulders above the rest. In 3 games in a row, he's had 2 touchdown passes, so that looks good there. Last game, he had 297 yards. I think that bodes well. Now, here's why I think this is a good matchup for him. One, he's played a defense that isn't that good, but Matt Ryan has been very good lately, averaging over 300 passing yards per game. He's got 19 touchdown passes to 3 picks, meaning much like when they played Kansas City, Mayfield's going to have to throw early and often to keep up with Ryan in that offense there. Also, I mentioned that Atlanta's defense isn't very good. Before last week, the 5 previous games, that Atlanta defense had allowed 34 points per game. So I think this is a good matchup for Baker Mayfield. If you have a guy in a bye or if you're in a deeper league or whatever, he's a guy that you could pick up and play. And that brings us to Matt Ryan. Just start Matt Ryan. Right now he's averaging 360 passing yards per game in the last 6. In the last 7 games, he has 19 touchdown passes to only 1 interception. Now you look at the defense there. That defense, what is the big turnaround for Matt Ryan on this one? Well, I think the biggest reason why I love Matt Ryan as far as a quarterback moving forward is that defense for Atlanta is not very good. They lost some major starters early in the season, and we mentioned how many points they're giving up. I think another thing that helps is development tight end Hooper, drafting Ridley. The running game is struggling. So it's like this perfect storm of why Matt Ryan is just going to be a stud. I don't know why I'm giving you all this information. I could say here's why, give you the numbers and breakdowns, but just ultimately start Matt Ryan. Okay, he's just a great play week in and week out. As far as running backs go, let's look at Nick Chubb. He had a solid game versus Kansas City and should have another solid week versus the Falcons, who give the 4th most points to running backs. Started as a solid running back 2 this week. As far as Duke Johnson goes, last week we actually said that Duke Johnson is the guy that you want to consider playing if you're in a PPR league, if you have a flex position. He's going to have an increase in targets and better usage in there, and sure enough, he did. He had a good game there. Well, I think that continues this week. Start him in PPR leagues as a flex. I like Duke Johnson. They're going to have to use him a lot in this game as they play catch-up. And you have Tevin Coleman. So Tevin Coleman plays the Browns, give the 3rd most points to running backs there. With Freeman out, you need to start Coleman as a running back too. After struggling for a while there, his production has risen the last 2 games there, so I think you can feel better about starting him. That brings us to Ito Smith. This is a guy who'd been touchdown dependent, but he does have 4 touchdowns in the last 5 games. I do think he's going to have a decent amount of carries in this one, probably 10 to 12. In deep league, I would trust him as a flex. He's kind of an RB3 is where he lands. As far as wide receivers go, you have Jarvis Landry. Now he's playing Atlanta, who give the 3rd most points to wide receivers. He is the clear #1 wide receiver for the Browns. He's been averaging 11 targets per game. This is a guy who needs to be started. Concern I have, though, is his yards are lower and his TDs are not great. So start him in PPR leagues as a wide receiver 2. He's on pace for 98 catches for the season, so that's a good number there. But in standards, he's a wide receiver 3 low end play. So he's a wide receiver 3 in standards, but even then he's at that lower end of it because the only thing you can really trust him for is a lot of catches and targets. As far as the other Bears wide receivers go, outside of you could start maybe Callaway, but honestly, when I begin to look at these guys, I think it's really hard to trust. I would sit all other wide receivers for the Browns there, even though on paper it looks like a good matchup. There's not one that you can definitively trust in this one. As far as Julio Jones, start as wide receiver 1 stud, just start him. It's a no-brainer. Calvin Ridley, playing the Browns, allowed the 8th most points to wide receivers, started as a wide receiver 3, got 7 touchdowns on the year. The rookie continues to develop nicely. He had a nice game last week, 6 catches, 71 yards, and a touchdown, so look at him. Then Mohamed Sanu. I would sit Sanu at this point. I would only trust Sanu if either Jones or Ridley got hurt. That's kind of where I'm at with that one. As far as tight ends, we got Austin Hooper. The Browns allowed the 3rd most points to tight ends. I think he's a solid safe start. A line of somewhere around 5 catches, 75 yards, and maybe you'll get a bonus touchdown there. I don't know, but that's where I think he'll land numbers-wise. As far as David Njoku here, since Baker has taken over, Baker Mayfield has taken over, he's been solid 5 of his 6 games. Now, he did have one game there, he got a 0. That's going to happen at times. He's not a Tier 1 tight end, but he's a guy that you need to start there. As far as kickers go now, Matt Bryant missed last week because of a hamstring injury. He may play this week. If he plays, start him. If he doesn't, you have Tavecchio. And Tavecchio is actually not a bad start either. Obviously, Bryant is a better kicker, but Tavecchio in this offense is all right. I would sit Joseph, and I would sit both defenses in this game. Let's look at the Patriots versus the Titans. Let's look at Tom Brady. So Texans gave up the 6th fewest points to quarterbacks, but I think those numbers are a bit deceiving. They haven't really faced that many. They only really faced 3 good quarterbacks, which is Rivers, Wentz, and Watson. Those 3 guys, when they faced the Titans, they averaged 310 passing yards and 2 touchdown passes per game. You look at the other guys that they faced, simply weren't that good. You look at Tom Brady this year, he's been good, but not great. Now, some of it, I think it's hard. He hasn't had a lot of weapons on the field. Gronkowski was injured. Took Gordon there to, I think, learn that offense and get better, although he's getting more and more comfortable. You look at Julian Edelman, missed the first 4 games there. So I think things are going to come around for Tom. I think that he's going to have a good game there. There's no guarantee that Gronkowski is going to be back, but even if Gronkowski is out, you need to start Tom Brady in this one. My biggest fear to his production this week is a blowout, but start Tom Brady. As far as Marcus Mariota goes, he played well Monday night. He also played well against Philadelphia. Other than that, he has really struggled. Why has he struggled? Well, maybe a few reasons, I suppose. One, he's faced some tough defenses, and his upcoming schedule is going to get a little bit more quarterback friendly. He's been beat up. Hopefully he had that bye week, able to rest that body, get healthy, had some injuries there, so hopefully he's doing better. I think also they're starting to get Deion Lewis more involved in that offense, and that is huge. Deion Lewis has great hands. Last year he led all running backs in catch percentage. We hammered it all summer long. Well, first of all, we hammered on Derrick Henry. We're not huge fans. We said he's going to have a bad year. He is. But we sung the praises of Deion Lewis. And sure enough, we're beginning to see it now. He's simply the better back of the two, and he really helps that passing offense a lot. Now, I'm not ready to declare after Monday to say Marcus Mariota is out of water yet, but I do think he's beginning to turn a corner there, and he can become somebody reliable if you need to plug somebody in or if you're in a deeper league. I think another thing that bodes well for Monday night is that Dallas defense is actually underrated. And so he actually had a pretty good day against a fairly good Dallas defense that going into last week allowed the 9th fewest points to quarterbacks there. Now he's playing New England, who allows the 9th most points to quarterbacks there. So I think if you need to trust someone like Marcus Mariota, if you're really desperate there, I think you could play him. I'd like to see another game or two before I feel comfortable saying, yeah, you could start him every week at this point. As far as running backs go, Sony Michel, he was close to returning last week. ESPN Adam Schefter reports that Sony Michel knee is likely to return this week versus the Titans. Now during weeks 4 through 6, he had just a great production there. During those 3 weeks, he actually had 4 touchdowns and averaged over 100 rushing yards per game. So if he plays, you need to start him. Now, early in the year, after those 3 games, he was starting to get into that running back 1 conversation in terms of what that, okay, this is a guy that is legitimately good. He's coming back from an injury there, and so right now for me, I'm not going to call him running back 1 at this point. I would say that he's a moderate running back 2 until we see that he comes back and that knee is fine and he's good to go. As far as James White goes, start this guy. 10 touchdowns in 9 games. He's on pace for 108 catches for the year. He's a running back 1 in PPR, as a running back 2 in standard. Start him. Then there's Cordell Patterson. Cordell Patterson looked pretty good there. He offers a lot. He brings a lot to the table, but you only want to consider starting him if Sony Michel sits. If he sits, he would be a nice sleeper play as a running back 3 in bigger leagues as a flex. Then there's Deion Lewis. We've been staying for a while now in the preseason. This guy's got good value in PPR leagues. The Titans coaches are finally going away from Henry and starting to use Deion Lewis, and we're seeing it. He's had back-to-back really good games, so he's a solid start as a running back 2 or flex. Then you got Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry is touchdown dependent, so I would sit him in PPR leagues. Maybe you could start him in standards as a running back 3 if you're in a pinch, but I think personally, not only would I not start this guy, but personally I wouldn't even own him at this point, so I would just dump him. But if you happen to be, I know some that are in 16-team leagues and the waiver wire is picked thin and you got him on your bench, and if your guy's in a bye, if you had some injuries, then I suppose you could start him. As As far as wide receivers go, you have Julian Edelman. Playing the Titans allowed the 10th most points to wide receivers. Start Julian Edelman as a wide receiver 2 and PPR as a wide receiver 3 in standards. Josh Gordon, 2 of the last 3 games, he's had 100 yards. His role is beginning to grow. Brady's getting more and more comfortable with him. They're building rapport. Start as a wide receiver 2. Then you have Corey Davis. Last game, he had 10 targets. That was a team high. In fact, he drew 34.5% of the team targets last game. He's their best receiver, and they're going to need to throw a lot in this game. Last season in the playoffs versus New England, he had a nice line of 5 catches, 63 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So I would start him as a wide receiver 3. All the other wide receivers for the Titans, I would sit. All the other wide receivers for the Titans, I would sit. And then let's get to tight ends. So get to Juno Smith. He had a touchdown last game, but he's only averaging 1 catch per game. Sit him. Rob Gronkowski. So I don't know if he's going to play or not. Some people speculate. I would imagine if I'm the New England Patriots, I'm dealing with Rob Gronkowski. He has that back issue. If he sits out this game and then they have the bye week, that would give him 3 weeks in a row to rest that back and get healthy. So I'm going to lean towards the fact that they're going to sit him. But if he happens to play, you got to start him because he's Rob Gronkowski, and that position is very thin there. As far as kicker go, I would start Gostkowski, and I would sit Ryan Suckup. I would start New England's defense versus the Titans, allowing 9th most points to quarterbacks, and I would sit Tennessee. So what about the Jaguars versus the Colts? Look at Blake Bortles. I could argue why maybe he'd be a good start. I could say things like, well, Indy's defense is not great. Andrew Luck is playing so well, he'll put points on the board. Blake Bortles will have to throw, maybe corrected things on the bye week. But he's simply been bad lately. The last 4 games, he's got 3 touchdown passes to 4 interceptions. He was pulled from 1 game. I would not trust him at all. He's also struggled on the road this year, and they're playing on the road this weekend, and so I would sit him. As far as Andrew Luck's go, he's playing the Jags, and the Jaguars are a tough matchup. They'll the 4th fewest points to quarterbacks. But if you look at, besides Pat Mahomes, there is no harder quarterback in the NFL right now than Andrew Luck. In the last 5 games, he had 18 touchdown passes. This guy is on fire. He's on pace for 48 touchdown passes for the year. Yeah, this guy's healthy, and he's good to go. Even in a tougher matchup, you need to start him. As far as running backs go, I would sit Hyde. That offense is bad. He's going to give up snaps to Yeldon, and it sounds like Leonard Fournette should be back there, so don't even think about it. Yeldon, I would only start Yeldon if Fournette sits. If he does sit, then Yeldon could be started as a running back 2 or flex in PPR leagues. As far as Leonard Fournette goes, it appears he's going to play this week, and he practiced on Monday. If he does start, he's a running back 2 in standards. He's got less value in PPR leagues. He's still running back 2, but I would lower your expectations. Then Marlon Mack. Playing the Jaguars give the 8th fewest points to running backs. He's coming off of 3 consecutive really, really good weeks, so you need to start him as a running back 2 in spite of the fact that his matchup is tough. You have Nyheim Hines there, the running back for the Colts. I think he's got value in PPR leagues. He's got great hands. He's loose in open field there. But with the Jaguars, with Mack healthy, I'd sit him. As far as wide receivers go, T.Y. Hilton. He's seen less targets since he came back from his injury, but I think those numbers are going to rebound. Okay, you look at the early in his years, him and Andrew Luck have great rapport. He's been his favorite target by far. And before the injury, he'd averaged 10 targets through the first 3 games. Now, he will see Jalen Ramsey, so I would say he's a lower wide receiver 3 this week. I would sit all other Indy wide receivers in this matchup. So I don't trust Blake Bortles, I mentioned previously. Therefore, you look at Cole and Westbrook are inconsistent. They can't be trusted. I would sit them. If you had a wide receiver there that you want to start for the Jaguars, it would be Moncrief, Dante Moncrief there. He's been the most consistent wide receiver. 4 of the last 5 games, he's been solid. And the 4 of the last 5 games, he's averaging 5.5 catches, 79 yards. Started as a wide receiver 3. As far as tight ends go, I would sit the Jaguars tight ends. Eric Ebron has 7 touchdowns on the year. Can't ignore the guy. He's played really well there. But he is playing the Jaguars that allow the 8th fewest points to tight ends. And right now with Doyle back, Ebron is touchdown dependent. And so he's a very low-end tight end start. As far as Jack Doyle goes, when he's been healthy, he's averaged 6.5 catches per game and 65 yards. But with the Jags being a very good defense and Eric Ebron there, I think Doyle's a guy that you're probably going to start, but he's not a high-end play this week. As far as kickers go, start Adam Vinatieri. Jaguars allow the 3rd most points to kickers, and I would start Lambeau. Indy allows the 2nd most points to kickers there. This could be there could be a lot of field goals in this one. The Jaguars are too good to sit at this point, but Andrew Luck is playing at a very high level. And so go ahead and start him if you don't have other options out there, but understand that this is not the Jaguars of last year. As far as Indy's defense goes, Jacksonville allows the 2nd most points to defense. Indy's a decent start in this one based on matchup, but they're not a good defense. They had one good day versus the Bills, but against New England, Jets, and Oakland, they average 1 fantasy point per game. So there's a risk there. Some of you are going to be forced to start Indy, and that's fine. I would rather look elsewhere. Cardinals versus the Chiefs there, Josh Rosen. So they got new offensive coordinator Brian Leftwich. He's going to really try to open some things up there, and they're going to be playing catch-up all game long. Let's just be honest. Kansas City's going to score a ton of points there. And so Rosen's going to have to throw, but he carries a lot of risk. He's starting to make some progress as a rookie, but he's still a rookie. He doesn't have great weapons. That offensive line for the Cardinals is not good. Now he plays Kansas City, allows these 6 most points at quarterbacks. Besides the last game, Rosen hadn't thrown for more than 1 touchdown pass per game. In fact, the other games only had 3 total versus 5 interceptions in the other 5 games, so I'd probably sit Josh Rosen. Even though he might be a great volume play, I would still avoid him. Pat Mahomes, they need to tell you to start him. If I need to tell you to start him, I don't know if you should be playing fantasy football. You deserve to lose. Got 29 touchdown passes for the year. He's averaging 322 passing yards per game. He's on pace for 52 touchdown passes. Oh, don't forget he's added 2 rushing touchdowns also. Right now, the MVP is going to either be either him or Todd Gurley, and right now, according to the polls today, it's going to be Pat Mahomes. So we'll see how the rest of the year goes, but this guy's phenomenal. As far as running backs go, look at David Johnson. Kansas City allows the most points to running backs. Now, his yards per carry are going to be low, and they've been low. But I think he's going to be very active in the passing game in this one. They're going to have to throw a lot. David Johnson's got very good hands for a running back. You don't forget that. He's just got very good hands. Forget running back. He's very solid. 6 or 7 catches in this game, I think are very reasonable. And you also think that even though this offense has struggled and he has struggled, he does have 6 touchdowns in 8 games. And so I would start him as what I would call a middle-of-the-road running back too. As far as Kareem Hunt, starts as a running back 1. This guy's a stud. He's really returned to last form. It's the form that he had last season where he was really hitting on all cylinders. In that offense, this guy's on pace for 23 touchdowns, so go ahead and start him. Then you have Larry Fitzgerald in this one. Last 3 games, Larry has shown some life. In the last 3 games, he's got 28 targets, 2 touchdowns, 17 catches. They're going to need to throw a lot, so I would say that he's going to be a strong start as a wide receiver 3. And then Christian Kirk, playing Kansas City, allowing the 13 most points to wide receivers. Kirk has averaged 6.5 targets and 63 yards the last 6 games. He's also got 2 touchdowns in the last 4 games, so I would start him as a wide receiver 3 in deep leagues. As far as Tyreek Hill goes, start as a wide receiver 2. Now, he might see a lot of Patrick Peterson, and the Cards give up the 10th fewest points to wide receivers there, but he still needs to be played in this offense. Sammy Watkins is a wide receiver 3 in this matchup. Now, he does carry risk. And the reason why they got Kelsey, Hill, Hunt, TDs and touches get spread around quite a bit. So he's going to always run boom or bust, hot or cold with him. But he's simply too good, and that offense is too good to sit him, so he needs to be played. As far as tight ends go, you got Travis Kelce. He's the number 1 tight end in football right now. That guy's phenomenal. You got Ricky Seals-Jones. I would sit him. Kansas City may allow a lot of points to tight ends, but he simply can't be trusted. Besides the Minnesota game, Ricky Seals-Jones is only averaging 2 catches per game. As far as kickers go, I would start Harrison Butker. I would sit Dawson. I would sit the Cards, and I would start Kansas City. So what about the Bills versus the Jets? It's going to be Peterman. Is it going to be Anderson? Is it going to be Allen? Who cares? They're all bad. And so they said that they're going to make an announcement who's going to start at this point. I thought about doing research and numbers, but honestly, just stay away from all those quarterbacks. Then you have Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold's leading the NFL right now in interceptions. He's played bad. He's actually regressing in terms of play goes. So, and he's actually facing an underrated Bills defense. So just sit all the quarterbacks in this game. Don't even consider it. As far as running backs go, LaShawn McCoy, 3 weeks in a row, he's been bad. In fact, 3 weeks in a row, he's had totals of 25 rushing yards and 24 carries. That offense is just simply not good. Take that offense, a quarterback situation, teams are going to load the box and force them to beat them through the air. That's not good for LaShawn McCoy. It's better that you sit him. You got Isaiah Crowell. Now, Isaiah Crowell is playing the Bills, get the 10th most points to running backs. But this is another situation very similar to McCoy. Sam Darnold's not playing very well, so defenses load the box and force him to beat him in the air. So that just doesn't bode well for any running backs there. So his production's declining. He's a running back 4. Avoid him. In fact, if you had to pick a running back right now in that backfield, to me it would probably be Elijah McGuire. Because he's used an awful lot in the passing game, I think he could be started as a flex pay in PPRs that are large. As far as the wide receivers, sit all Bills wide receivers. They're all bad. And as far as Jets wide receivers go, they're playing the Bills that allow the 5th fewest points to wide receivers. I would sit all Jets wide receivers in this one. I would sit the Bills tight end. If you had to start a tight end in this matchup, it would probably be Chris Herndon, the tight end for the Jets. He's got touchdowns in 3 or 4 games. His role is increasing, so he can be played as a deep tight end, although you probably have better options out there. This could be a very low-scoring affair. It could be a lot of field goals, very much like last game, Miami versus the Jets. And so I actually would start both kickers, Stephen Hauschka and Myers in this one. And I would start both defenses in what should be a turnover feast. Let's look at the Redskins and the Bucs. Let's look at Alex Smith. Playing Tampa Bay, who allows the most points to quarterbacks, and they are the worst defense in the NFL. A few days ago, this looked like a great matchup. Now, last week he played an Atlanta defense that wasn't very good. He had a decent day, but kind of quiet, 306 yards and a touchdown pass. Now, the one thing about bodes well is he had an okay day against the Falcons defense, and Tampa Bay's defense is worse than the Falcons, if that's possible, but it is. They do it. I thought this was a great matchup initially, but things are quickly starting to fall apart for the Redskins. I feel kind of bad for them. One, their wide receivers are banged up. Crowder might miss the game. Richardson went on the IR. He's done for the year. They lost 2 starters in the offensive line that went on the IR, and a third offensive lineman that's going to miss a game with a sprained MCL. So that offensive line is wrecked at this point. And so that offense might actually make Tampa Bay's defense look okay this weekend. So he's got a great matchup, but everything is working against him right there, and therefore that to me makes him a risky play. I would probably sit him. You have Ryan Fitzpatrick. So if you look at the Washington defense, they've been very stingy against the run. Heading into last week, they only allowed 80 rushing yards per game. So I think that they're going to take away the run from Tampa Bay. I think that'll be pretty easy. And once again, Ryan Fitzpatrick will have to throw the ball through the air. He's got good weapons there. And he's playing a defense that's vulnerable against the pass. They allow the 13th most points to quarterbacks, so I would start Ryan Fitzpatrick. Adrian Peterson. So early in the year, I came out and I said, you know what? I just think he's past his prime. He's not going to be that good. He proved me wrong. This guy's been phenomenal. I'm happy for Adrian Peterson. Unfortunately, the guy turned back the hands of time, but now everything's fallen apart for him. Last week against Atlanta, he had 9 carries for 17 yards. Now he does face Tampa Bay. That's the worst defense in the NFL, and they allow the 7th most points to running backs. Concern I just mentioned, though, is they lost 3 offensive linemen. They lost a wide receiver. The weapons aren't there. I just think right now things are trending in the wrong direction. Now, I think this week you could start Adrian Peterson as a running back too because the matchup is so good. But moving forward beyond this week, you may want to trade Adrian Peterson while his value is still somewhat high. I do have concerns moving forward. Then Capri Bibbs and Chris Thompson. Let's look at both of those guys for the Redskins. If Chris misses another week with a rib injury, and he might, Bibbs is a great start. He's very active in the passing game. The Tampa Bay's defense is vulnerable to running backs that are active in the passing game. That's exactly who he is as a player. And so if Thompson sits, I would start Capri. If it turns out Chris Thompson plays, obviously sit Capri and start Chris Thompson. And both of them are running back 3s or flex plays in PPR leagues. As far as Peyton Barber goes, I mentioned to you that this Washington defense going into last game only allowed 80 yards per game rushing total. Peyton Barber is not a good running back, so I just think you need to sit Barber in this one. As far as wide receivers go, who do you start right now? Well, Maurice Harris is a wide receiver that last week he went off. 10 catches, 124 yards. I thought that was kind of a fluke. Now, he does have a great matchup. They're playing Tampa Bay. That allows the 2nd most points to wide receivers. Crowder may not be back. Now we talked about Richardson's out for the year. And so if Crowder doesn't come back, he's actually a guy that would be a nice sleeper as a wide receiver 3 in deep leagues. Then you have Jamison Crowder. Jamison Crowder comes back. He's got a great matchup there. If he happens to return, I would start him as a wide receiver 3 in PPR leagues that are larger in 12 teams. You have Josh Doxson. Found the end zone last week, but still far from a good play in this one. The matchup is ideal, and the Skins are hurting for wide receivers, but because of his inconsistent play, he's nothing more than a wide receiver, probably 4. There's Mike Evans. Last week, Mike Evans had on paper what would be a great matchup, but the guy was terrible. I think he had 1 catch on 10 targets. Now, this week he'll be facing Josh Norman, but even number 1 wide receivers that have faced Josh Norman this year have done pretty well. And so I think that Mike Evans is going to rebound. You got to start him. He's a stud. Don't make that mistake and sit him and he rebounds for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. That brings us to the other wide receivers for Tampa Bay. You got Godwin, Jackson, Humphreys. Earlier, it looked like Deshaun Jackson was the guy to start there. Godwin was getting targeted in the red zone, but now the guy that's getting a lot of attention there is Humphreys. Now, I do think Jackson has 5 touchdowns on the year. He's a wide receiver 3 or 4, depending on your league size. It could be started. I would sit Godwin. He's fallen down to a wide receiver 5 level. And Humphreys started as a wide receiver 3 until his usage changes again. So right now, he's trending in the right direction. He could be a wide receiver 3. As far as tight ends go, you have Jordan Reed. Playing Tampa Bay allowed the 3rd most points to tight ends. He's been a big disappointment this season. It's hard not to start him because tight end position is so thin and he's got a good matchup. And the wide receivers are hurt there, so he's a lower end start him, but really lower your expectations. Then you have Vernon Davis. This guy has glimpses of being great. All of a sudden he'll show talent, he'll look good, and then he'll just disappear for games at a time there. And so you can start him if you have to in a great matchup, but I hope you have better options out there. He's just so inconsistent. He could go out, get you 5 catches, 75 yards, but just as easily get you 1 catch for 10 yards. So that's my take. O.J. Howard, tight end for the Buccaneers. 4 touchdowns in the last 4 games. This is a young, upcoming star tight end in the NFL. Start him. Start Hopkins, sit Cazzaro. I would sit Tampa Bay's defense. You could start the Skins if you need to against a team that's allowing a lot of defensive points. So that's you may land on that you may do. Chargers and the Raiders. Look at Derek Carr. I would sit Derek Carr. The Chargers are playing better defense now. They're starting to look like a defense that everybody thought that they would be going into this season. Somewhere people felt they would be a top 5 to 7 defense in the NFL. And there's a chance, an outside chance, that Joey Bosa could be back in this one. Now you add to the fact that Derek Carr has simply been bad. He's had 2 good games, but otherwise in the other 6 games, he only has 3 touchdown passes to 6 picks. And you have Philip Rivers. So I would start him versus the Raiders, allowing the 8th most points to quarterbacks. They can't get any pressure on the quarterback. In fact, they cut their best pass rusher this weekend. Doesn't make any sense there. I don't know if it's a money-saving issue or whatnot. Last week against the Raiders, practice squad quarterback Mullins for San Francisco went out and had 262 yards and 3 TDs. And their best receiver is Pierre Garçon. So that kind of puts in perspective why you should start Philip Rivers. As far as running backs go, Melvin Gordon. Starting versus Carolina, allowing the 9th most points to quarterbacks. He's a running back 1 stud. You start him every week and feel good about that. And you had Austin Eckler. I like Austin Eckler, and I think he's going to see extra touches in a game that should be a blowout there. So I would start Austin Eckler as a running back 3, flex play or flex play in PPR leagues. As far as Doug Martin goes, I would sit Doug Martin if you can afford to do that. Now, they got a lack of wide receivers in that offense there. They're going to be playing from behind. And what that means is an increased role for running backs Richard and Washington, who are going to be in the field a lot because they're used a lot in passing situations. So I just don't think Doug Martin's going to get a lot of touches. He's going to see a lot of time on the field there. Now, that brings us to Jalen Richards and DeAndre Washington. I really like Richards. I think he's got a great play. I think this guy's very active passing game. He's got good hands. The concern I have now that Washington is back is those guys are almost exactly the same, almost same size, physical build. Their skill set similar, so they steal carries and touches from one another, even targets in the passing game. If either one of those went down with an injury, I would love the other guy to start. But with them both in there, I don't trust either. I would stay away from them. As far as wide receivers go, you got Keenan Allen. Some people are getting afraid, like, what happened? I know you took him off. Somebody took a late first round, early second, depending upon your league size. He really wasn't putting up the numbers, but it's important to remember that last year, he really took off after week 9. So we said, you know what, don't panic. This guy's good. He's going to be fine. Sure enough, last week, 6 catches, 124 yards. We hope he played him. Started as a wide receiver 1. Then you have Tyrell Williams and Mike Williams. So Mike has only had 1 catch per game in 4 of the last 5 games. Sit him, even though he's had some touchdowns, even though he's got some potential there. Then Tyrell Williams had 4 touchdowns in 3 games, but his targets and catches are not high. He's only averaging 2.75 catches per game. He's touchdown dependent. And I think in this game that they may need to throw less. They might get out in front by quite a bit. They may run the ball quite a bit. It could be a blowout. So for me, Tyrell Williams in this one is a wide receiver 4. I would sit the Chargers tight ends. You could start Jared Cook if you need to as a lower end tight end. I would sit the Chargers kicker. They had to drop Sturgis this week, who missed 2 extra points in a field goal. And I would sit the Raiders kicker. I would sit Oakham, but start the Chargers defense in this one. So the Dolphins versus the Packers. Tannehill, Brock Osweiler. There's another quarterback situation that's kind of a mess. Said they're going to announce on Wednesday. Sounds like Tannehill is far from being ready to go at this point. Brock has gotten worse and worse ever since his week 6 start. But that's not really a surprise because around his career just simply has not been good. He's reverted back to the old form that we've come to know and love from Brock there. So last week he had 139 yards passing, has thrown a touchdown pass in 2 weeks. So I need to even tell you why not to play any of the Miami quarterbacks. Stay away from them. Aaron Rodgers, have another solid season. Start him in this one. He's a no-brainer. Then goes to running back Aaron Jones. His carries are starting to pick up, and that's really good. They're playing Miami, allowing the 6th most points to running back. Start him as a running back 2 and feel good about that this week. You have Jamal Williams. Jamal Williams is going to continue to see a role there in that offense. They like him in passing situations. He's good at blocking. He's good at protection, but he simply can't be trusted in terms of carries and production and yardage, things like that. So I would say Jamal Williams. The only way that I would consider starting him is if Aaron Jones were to really struggle for consecutive weeks or lose his job, get injured, something like that. Then we have Frank Gore in this one. Oh, man, I don't even know what to say about this. You need to sit Frank Gore. He's getting a lot of carries, but he shouldn't be. He's a guy that's touchdown dependent. Kenyon Drake, when he touches the ball, this guy's electric. Things happen. But for some reason, the coaches are still in love with Gore, and I don't understand for the life of me why they're that way. You look at Kenyon Drake. He's had 4 very good games in a row, and then last week they just go away from without explanation. They give Gore 20 carries for 53 yards, 2.7 yards per carry. It's just brutal. Kenny Drake should be a solid running back 2 start every week. But unfortunately, until the coaches commit to using him more, he's a flex play as a lower end running back 2 for me. Now, I've got to assume that the coaches are going to go back this week, look at game film, discuss it, and realize we've got to get the ball back in Drake's hands. I think they will this game. I think he's too good to sit, so he's a lower end running back 2. He's a flex play. As far as wide receiver, Devontae Adams with Rodgers at quarterback, he's a weekly wide receiver 1. Just start him. Again, Marquise Valdez-Scantling. Well, Geronimo Allison went on the IR today. You look at Valdez-Scantling role is growing. The last 4 weeks, he's got 2 touchdowns, twice at over 100 yards. The door's really open to him to really take a hold of that job as the wide receiver 3. I would start him as a wide receiver 3 here. You have Randall Cobb. Now he's playing Miami, allows the 9th fewest points at quarterbacks. I don't like Cobb's. Just not been that productive minus week 1, so I would sit him. Let's go to the Miami Dolphins wide receivers. You got Danny Amendola can be started as a wide receiver 3 or flex in PPR leagues that are deep. I would sit all their Miami wide receivers until that quarterback situation improves. As far as tight ends go, I would sit the Miami tight ends, and I would start Jimmy Graham. I would start Crosby. I would sit Sanders. I would sit Miami's D. Now, initially, it looked like the Packers' defense versus Miami might be a good play, but between trades and some injuries to their defense, it's probably better that you sit them too. So let's take a look at Seattle versus the Rams. Okay, let's look at Russell Wilson in this one. Rams allow the 2nd fewest points to quarterbacks. I think Russell Wilson will need to throw a lot in this game, and he's been playing well. Now, earlier this year versus the Rams, he had 3 touchdown passes. So I think we could start Russell Wilson as a lower-end quarterback play, but definitely outside the top 12. Maybe looking at 12 to 15 in that range there. Jared Goff looks much better when Cooper Kupp is in there. It's just that such a huge weapon. Cooper Kupp, I think, is so underrated. I love that guy. No, they're playing Seattle allows the fewest points to quarterbacks, but I think those numbers, you look at Seattle, once again, allowing the fewest points to quarterbacks, I think those numbers are deceiving, and they padded those numbers versus quarterbacks like Rosen, Carr, Case, Mitch, before Mitch started to turn things around there. And so I think Jared Goff at home is going to have a big game there. Start Jared Goff. Start Todd Gurley. Obviously, don't need me to tell you that. A lot of conversation about Malcolm Brown this week. Is he a guy they should pick up or play? I think Malcolm Brown's a guy that could have a lot of usage later in the year when they begin to get close to the playoff. But right now, unless Gurley sits or gets injured, hope that doesn't happen, I would stay away from using Malcolm Brown there. As far as Mike Davis, Chris Carson's injured. Coach Pete Carroll said that Chris Carson, thigh and hip, is sore and won't do much at practice this week. And so I think that he's going to skip a game. This guy's been beat up. Chris Carson's got a lot of injuries there. You look, he's dealing with a hip injury, a thigh injury, a groin injury. Playing him, it could re-aggravate it. So I would sit Chris Carson, but I would play Mike Davis this week. I think he's got a good matchup there as a running back too. I would sit Rashad Penny. As far as wide receivers go, you look at Brandon Cooks, Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, they're all good. Now, the problem with this, they're all good, and they steal targets from one another, but they are playing a very good offense. There's a lot of volume in there, so I would say that all those guys should be started, but they're started as wide receiver 3s. I prefer Cooper Kupp as a wide receiver 2 in PPRs. Cook is better in standards, so varies a little bit. As far as tight ends go, I would sit all tight ends in this game. I would start Greg Zuerlein, I would sit Janikowski, I would start the Rams defense, and I would sit Seattle's defense. So let's look at the Cowboys versus the Eagles. Dak Prescott versus Philadelphia, allowing the 10th most points to quarterbacks. Dak had showed a little bit of progress lately, playing maybe a little bit better. I think Amari Cooper in there is going to help. It helped a little bit last game. I think their rapport is going to grow. Michael Gallup looks like he's getting better and better. The rookie's starting to figure things out a little bit there. The matchup is good, but Dak Prescott's just not a good option yet. Even though things are getting better there, it's very subtle, it's very slow. They've got a long way to go before Dak Prescott can be started and trusted. So if you are forced into a position where you have to play them, you need to keep your expectations lower. You got Carson Wentz versus the Dallas defense that allows not a lot of points to quarterbacks. But just like other teams, if you look at that Dallas defense, they're not allowing a lot of points to quarterbacks, but they padded those numbers. They faced Alex Smith, Bortles, Eli, and so I think that none of those quarterbacks are anything like Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz is playing really well. Now, last 5 games, Carson's got 12 touchdown passes to only 1 interception. Start Carson Wentz in this one. I also love the fact he's got Golden Tate there. That's going to be a huge weapon for him. And so I think start him and have very little worries. I like Carson Wentz moving forward. A lot of people forgot about this guy. He's legit. As far as running backs go, Ezekiel Elliott, despite the fact that this offense is struggling, he's having a very good year. Start that guy. Josh Adams. So here we get into a very tricky situation as far as the running backs go. Josh Adams has the potential to become the running back 1 there. Smallwood and Clement have struggled. And so last game, he looked by far the best of the three. Unfortunately, I need to see one more game from Josh Adams before I can trust him. Unless the coach were to come out this week and definitively say things like he's going to see he'll lead the team in touches. Now, if I know Doug Peterson, he's not going to say that. He's not going to come out and tip his hand. And so we really don't know until the game is over exactly how much usage Josh Adams is going to have. And so I think we need to have one more week before we can trust him. He should be on your bench, though. He needs to be owned because after this week, he could become a running back that's getting 15 to 20 carries a game. As far as Smallwood goes, he's a guy of the three that if you have to start this week, I'd probably do that. He's got more value in PPR leagues. And then Corey Clement, I don't know what happened to Corey. This guy looked good last year. His first game, he looked good, and the wheels just really came off for him there. Sit him. We got Amari Cooper. Playing Philadelphia, allowing the fourth most points to wide receivers. His first game was good there. I think we need another game from him before we can trust him. But I would still feel comfortable starting him as a wide receiver 3. As far as the other Dallas wide receivers, Gallup is developing. Beasley has PPR appeal. Allen Hurns is getting more production there, but I would sit all those guys. As far as wide receivers for Philadelphia, you got Alshon Jeffrey. Started as a wide receiver 2. He's had 2 quiet games, but in those quiet games, we predicted that he faced very good corners, Xavier Rhodes and Jalen Ramsey. Otherwise, he's been very productive this year. Start him. And then there's Golden Tate. I really love this move for him. I think that's going to be huge in that one there. I would start him as a wide receiver 2 in PPR, as a wide receiver 3 in standards. Start Zach Ertz. I would sit all their tight ends. I would start Elliott. I would start Mayer, the kicker for Dallas in this one. Sit Dallas defense, start Philly's defense. So we get to our final game there. Nick Mullins, what a fun story. What a great guy. Man, I'm so excited for him. He got called out the Patriots squad, went out there, had a good game. Maybe he's the next Kurt Warner. Comes out of nowhere. But I think we need to see one more game from him. 1, we need another game. 2, he doesn't have a lot of good wide receivers there. Doesn't have a lot of good weapons there. And so sit this guy. Then you got Eli Manning versus San Francisco, allowing the 7th most points to quarterbacks. Now, the last 4 games, Eli's averaged 330 yards passing. The problem is he's not throwing a lot of touchdowns. Eli just looks like he's lost back there. I don't know if it's the offensive line. I don't know what it is. If you're in deep leagues or a league that you have to start 2 quarterbacks, we know a couple people that are in 16-team league, 2 quarterback league, so 32 quarterbacks get started. You could play him. Otherwise, I think it's preferable to sit him. As far as running backs go, you have Saquon Barkley. Start him for sure. It's obvious. You got Matt Breida. He's beat up physically. His yards per carry have been dropping. His production is dropping. He's nothing more than a flex play in deep PPR leagues at this point, and watch the injury report to make sure he's going to suit up. You got Alfred Morris. Alfred Morris has standard appeal now that Raheem is out. I think this week he's going to get 10 to 12 carries. I wouldn't even think about starting him in a PPR league, but if you're in a very deep league and you're desperate, you could take a shot at him. There, start Odell Beckham as a wide receiver 1 and start Sterling Shepard as a wide receiver 3. I don't trust any of the San Francisco wide receivers. Their best one right now is probably Pierre Garçon. You got Goodwin's got a lot of talent, but he's just hit or miss. He's all or nothing. And so I don't trust him there. And the quarterback is young. There's so many red flags and many reasons why I wouldn't trust any of the wide receivers for San Francisco. You start George Kittle at tight end. This guy's a young stud. Right now, he's number 2 for yardage for tight ends, behind only Travis Kelce. So start Kittle, start Evan Ingram. I would sit both kickers, and you could actually start both defenses in this one. So it's a lot of information. I wish I could go deeper, but it would take forever if I really got into some of our numbers. But if you want to know why we put these guys where we did, the research study, numbers, things like that, put a message on the bottom. We'll be happy to answer for you. Thanks once again for joining us. God bless, and take care.